Solute and solvent. When one substance dissolves into another, a solution is formed. A solution is a homogeneous mixture consisting of a solute dissolved into a solvent. The solute is the substance that is being dissolved, while the solvent is the dissolving medium. Solutions can be formed with many different types and forms of solutes and solvents. A solute is a molecule or particle that is distributed in a solvent. There will always be less solute than solvent. That means in a solution the solute is always the minor component. Typically, the solute will be uniformly distributed in the solvent after mixing. Practically, the solute is also usually being added to the solvent. Solutes can be particles, atoms, or molecules. For example, salts are a common solute. When you add salt to water, the salt dissolves and distributes uniformly within the water. There is more water than salt. So then we know that water is the solvent. A solute can be a solid, liquid, or gas. The solute also does not have to be in the same phase as the solvent it is put into. For example, in soda, the gas bubbles solute are dispersed in the liquid solvent. There is a limit to how much solute can dissolve in a certain solution. The saturation point is when no more solute will dissolve in the solvent. The solvent is the molecule that makes up the majority of the solution. There is always more solvent than any other component present. Typically, the solvent is what everything else is dissolved into. A solvent is typically thought of as liquid, and that is the most common form. It can also be a solid or gas. There can be both polar and nonpolar solvents. Generally, a polar solvent will dissolve polar molecules. A nonpolar solvent will dissolve nonpolar molecules. This is sometimes referred to as like dissolves like. Polar solvents tend to include a high electronegativity element, such as nitrogen or oxygen. Nonpolar solvents are generally composed mostly of carbon and hydrogen. Solute versus solvent. The solvent is always the majority component. The solute is the minor component. This is the clearest way to distinguish between solvent and solute. And there can be more than one solute in a given solvent. The universal solvent. Water is known as the universal solvent. Water does not dissolve everything, but it does dissolve many things. More substances dissolve in water than any other common solvent. And that is where the designation of universal solvent comes from. Why is water so good at being a solvent? Water is a very polar molecule. Oxygen is highly electronegative, increasing the polarization, with a slight positive charge near the hydrogens and a negative charge near the oxygen. This means it can attract both positively and negatively charged molecules or ions. These factors make water an excellent solvent. Water as a universal solvent is necessary to keep our Earth functioning as we know it. As water travels, it picks up many different solutes along the way: minerals, salts, and nutrients. The water then distributes these as it flows to new areas. If these particles did not dissolve in water, many cycles on the Earth would slow or stop completely. Water can be either a solvent or a solute. For example, you could mix water and toluene together. Toluene is another common chemistry solvent. If you have 70% water and 30% toluene, then water is the solvent. However, if instead, you mix 75% toluene and 25% water, water is now the solute. It all depends on what the majority component is in the solution.